How often should you take vitamin D? Daily, weekly, or even monthly? I regularly get questions about vitamin D, and one of the most common is, how often should you actually take it? Daily intake is probably the standard. But now there are also products out there that are specifically designed for a weekly dosing. And in some scientific studies, vitamin D is even given only once per month. So in this video, we'll look at how often vitamin D should really be taken. Let's get started right after a quick intro. My name is Dr. Fabian Mutach. I hold a PhD in biochemistry. I'm a German scientist and founder of Cellventrix, a company with the goal to close the knowledge gap between science and your daily nutrition. And if you're interested in high quality, science-based nutrition facts, then subscribe to this channel. And now we'll dive right into the topic. Vitamin D is one of the most commonly used supplements. And supplementing vitamin D is inexpensive, and especially during the darker months of the year, it's almost impossible to maintain good vitamin D levels without supplementation. The standard recommendation is certainly a daily intake. But nowadays there are products out there on the market that claim you only need to take them once per week. For example, tablets containing 7,000 international units with the instruction 1 tablet per week. There are even tablets with 20,000 international units that are taken only every 20 days, which again averages out to about 1,000 international units per day. By the way, I wouldn't consider 1,000 international units per day a fixed rule. Vitamin D intake should always be individualized. The goal should be a blood level of at least 30 nanogram per milliliter. How much vitamin D supplement you personally need then of course varies from person to person. And my honest guess would be that 1,000 international units per day is quite conservative and often not enough to achieve and maintain a sufficient vitamin D level. Okay, but today's question in this video is not how much you should take, it's how often you should take vitamin D. And now let's look at the scientific literature. One study examined elderly people living in nursing homes. And naturally, of course, they spend less time outdoors and they get less sun exposure. Without supplementation, 98%, so basically all participants in that study, had low vitamin D levels. In this study, low meant below 20 nanogram per milliliter. And honestly, 20 nanogram per milliliter is really an absolute low limit. Ideally, levels should be at least 30 nanogram per milliliter, better above. On average, the residents had around 10 nanogram per milliliter. That was not very surprising, but it's really little vitamin D in their blood. The participants then received vitamin D either daily, weekly, or as a large dose only once per month. After 4 months, researchers measured vitamin D levels again. And now we'll have a look at the data, at the results. The daily group reached an average of 28 nanogram per milliliter. The weekly group reached almost 27 nanogram per milliliter. And the monthly group, however, only reached about 21 nanogram per milliliter. Overall, levels remained relatively low because participants in that study only received 600 international units per day. A higher dose might have made more sense, honestly, and that's my opinion. But again, that's another discussion. The question was not how much you should take, but how often you should take it. And the important takeaway is now, there was almost no difference between a daily and a weekly intake of a vitamin D supplement. However, monthly dosing resulted in clearly lower vitamin D levels. So daily or weekly intake, they both work well. Monthly dosing does not perform as well. And there are also physiological reasons to prefer daily or at most weekly intake. Let's have a look at real life. In real life, we don't go into the sun only once a month, get an excessive sun bath with the risk of a sunburn, only to produce massive amounts of vitamin D and then again hide indoors for the rest of the month. Entirely unrealistic, and I hope you don't do that. And some studies also have linked very large single doses, so-called bolus doses, to a higher risk of falls and fractures. And that's the exact opposite of what we want to achieve. So whether this risk truly exists, so falls and fractures or increase in the risk of fall and fractures, that is still debated. And some studies honestly did not find increased risks. But importantly, there is also no proven benefit of large and infrequent doses compared to smaller and regular dosing. And so there's no good reason, no reason at all, to switch to a monthly dosing, except maybe convenience. But convenience alone should never be a deciding factor. So my recommendation is pretty clear. Take vitamin D daily or at most weekly. And then the remaining question is simply, what works best for you? If taking vitamin D has already become part of your routine, of your daily routine, I mean, that's an excellent rhythm. And especially because weekly dosing then increases the risk of maybe forgetting a dose. And then you may try to compensate later with excessive amounts. And then in the end, you may take more than you actually wanted, or you may take less than you actually wanted. So basically, what's the takeaway? You need to choose the schedule you can follow consistently. And my personal take on this is that for most people, that will likely be a daily intake. And that brings us already to the end of this short video. I hope that you found it helpful. And of course, I'd love to see you again in the next video. Until then, take care. Yours sincerely, Dr. Fabian Muttach.